Welcome back here on Get Up. Let's keep things moving. NFL Monday. We got our resident QB, Dan Orlovsky, here with some quick reads, and we're going to break down some quarterback performances from the weekend. Dan, let's start with the number 2 pick in the draft, Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, it looks like he did in college. Precision. You know, the ball placement is his superpower, and some of the throws this past weekend versus the Dolphins, you saw it on the left shoulder there, bottom of the screen on the right shoulder. This is good coverage by the Dolphins, and what that ball placement is making sure that you're able to put it exactly where your guy can get it away from those people, and that showed consistently for Jayden Daniels.
We showed some tape earlier this morning. What stood out to you about Bo Nix?
This guy looks like Brock Purdy did early on. Can you make the right decision incredibly quickly? That is efficiency as a quarterback. The ball comes out so fast to the right place. And this now has me very intrigued, not with Bo Nix, but this Broncos offense. Bo Nix is going to be the starter. He has been since the moment they took him. I think that's going to get announced in the next day or two. But how quickly he makes the right decision for this offense, the ball doesn't hit the ground, nor does his butt. No sacks taken so far.
What about Tua Tagovailoa, got his first sack in the preseason?
Yeah, Tua looked like mid-season Tua. I mean, everything that Tua is about when it comes to how quickly, it's almost like what I just spoke about with Brock Purdy, how quickly he makes, Bo Nix, some of those decisions and how well he places the football to only the spot where his guys can go and make catches. He looked like he was in mid-season form.
All right, let's go out to Dallas, where the Cowboys still without their star receiver, CeeDee Lamb. He's holding out for that contract extension. But prior to Saturday's preseason game with the Raiders, Jerry Jones had this to say regarding the status of his number 1 wideout.
We're having the same kind of talks we've been having. Not worried about a target date, not worried about his shape. Glad he's not out here risking some injury.
Okay, that's Jerry for you. Glad he's not out here in the preseason. Jeff Darlington, give us a timeline on where are we with this CeeDee Lamb Cowboy thing?
Well, we certainly we understand in some sense what Jerry Jones is saying there. There's no reason to risk injury, but he also isn't in camp at all right now. And quite frankly, the season is creeping us up on September 8th being that date. So, look, this could go down any day now. It really could. The problem with it, I say that on one hand. On the other hand, it really doesn't feel like they've gotten to a point where they know the annual salary, where they know the contract length, where they know the structure of the contract when it comes to guaranteed money. So yes, it can all come together very quickly, but we don't really have any of those things feeling like there is any reason to think it is imminent. So the best I can tell you is that behind the scenes, the Cowboys remain optimistic, but until they get much closer to that number, that contract that Justin Jefferson has at $35 million a year, and maybe it doesn't have to be all the way there, we're not there yet. We still have 3 wide receivers, by the way, in Brandon Ayuk, Chase, who am I talking about with the Bengals?
Jamar Chase.
Who's dealing with
Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase,
sorry.
Yes.
And Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. So we've still got 3 wide receivers who are chasing those deals that the precedent was set with Justin Jefferson, and we're still not there with any of those 3.
Two-tier question for you, Hawk. I'm happy we got you here because as a receiver, you heard Jerry say, hey, I'm happy he's not here playing in the preseason. In other words, he's not out here maybe getting hurt. But because he hasn't gotten, let's say, into football shape, how long is that going to take for him to get ramped up? Because you fear if he comes back and then they tweak something, you're like, oh, my God, had he been in camp.
Every football player knows the only way to get in shape for football is by playing football. So he can be doing all the working out he wants to in the offseason until he's with his team, until he's going through those reps on a consistent basis and feels the rigors of what the season is going to feel like. His body is not going to truly be in shape, and he's going to risk some soft tissue injuries or, worst case, even beyond. I think also for this offense, he is the most important part of the way that McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys run their offense. It goes through him. And so you're actually not allowing the rest of the players on your offense to truly get their rhythm because you don't have that number 1 X receiver who is based in precision and the dink and dunk and take the shots. who literally gets moved around the entirety of the thing for it to go.
So if this deal gets done, what do you see as the ceiling for the Cowboys?
I think they're a Super Bowl contender. I mean, you have the best receiver in football a year ago. You have a quarterback who was an MVP candidate. You have one of the best defenders in the National Football League. You have 2 all-pro corners. Like, yeah, I know it's easy to say, well, they didn't do anything in the offseason. They already had a really good team. They addressed the offensive line. Yes, there's running back issues. Yes, there's things on the defensive line that need to be fixed. Dan Quinn is probably the biggest, departure for the Cowboys, but then they have Mike Zimmer coming in.
Yeah.
Unless 1 + 1 no longer equals 2, you can't have a team with this much talent and not say that they are right up there with the best teams in the NFC.
Happens the following week, teams use that as a little bit of a, we're not going to go heavy with what we're doing practice-wise or whatnot, almost like a bye because training camp is 5 or 6 weeks long. And so you're talking about if the deal doesn't get done with CeeDee this week, then next week it's a little bit of a lighter week for most of your football team because you're dealing with your final cuts and roster. So we're talking about even if it gets done in the next 10 days or 2 weeks, we're talking 3, 4, 5 days maximum of practice, real practice for CeeDee going into the season. The second element when it comes to our football team, the biggest question is going to be how good those 2 young offensive linemen are. CeeDee Lamb is going to play good football at some point this year. I think the deal gets done. But they drafted Guyton and Beebe, left tackle and center. Now, by all accounts, by both the tape and what people who I respect as offensive line viewpoint people, they say the Cowboys have hit on both of these players. And I trust their vantage point more than anybody's, essentially. So if those players are what they've shown to be at the start of preseason, I do think that this offense settles in to be a little bit better than I expected. But it's going to depend on how good those 2 rookie offensive linemen are realistically to what this football team can go achieve.
What do you think, Jeff?
To Dan's point, the deadline that they're looking for doesn't exist anymore. Like week 1 as your deadline to get this contract done is not a good deadline. I mean, that is the beginning of the season. So the problem with this negotiation at this point is that we have surpassed all of the previous benchmarks and deadlines to get this done, and now the only one remaining is week 1. They're in a bad spot when it comes to trying to find a way to push this deal across the line because they don't have a good marker. If week 1 is your marker, that is not a good thing for this team.
Yep. Yeah, I see you shaking your head.
That's a fact. I mean, they need him in this offense. It literally runs through him. And so for Dak to be on timing, for Brandon Cooks, for Ferguson, all of those are complementary weapons to what CeeDee Lamb is bringing to the table. If he is not ready, if he is not yet in football shape, this puts you at a disadvantage.
Okay, let's stay in the NFC East because Giants quarterback Daniel Jones, he made his preseason debut Saturday against the Texans, and I'm going to be honest, it was a struggle. It was Jones' first game since tearing that ACL, threw 2 interceptions in back-to-back series, including that pick 6 there by trying to avoid a safety. Listen, Dan, I know you watched Daniel Jones closely. You looked over the tape. What did you see out of his performance?
Yeah, worst case scenario and the most disappointing performance of the preseason so far. And I'm giving grace. I understand it's the first time playing since the ACL and the vantage point of that, so I get it. The problem is it's the same mistakes for Daniel Jones. Too deliberate, and then in those 0.2 of a second of panic, what do you do with the ball? That's first play of the game. You can't telegraph I'm throwing this ball to Malik Nabers more. That should have been another pick 6 for Stingley. It's very deliberate for Daniel. Okay, so you go play action. It's not there. Defense wins the rep. He goes to throw the ball away. I don't know why. Okay, now this is vintage Daniel. Like that moment of panic, the ball goes and just gets thrown for a pick 6. This is a great play by Stingley. It's also an underthrown football by Daniel Jones. And so it's the same mistakes. Daniel Jones, you're throwing against Stingley, who's one of the better corners in football, with Jalen Hyatt, who's still trying to find his footing as that guy in the league. Awareness of those matchups and the type of throw, Hawk, you know this, that's necessary in those situations. That's my issue with this is those mistakes. Now, he settled in and played better, yes. But those mistakes are the same mistakes that have been the narrative for Daniel Jones at Duke and in the NFL.
You know, Brian Daboll said afterwards, hey, listen, It's the first time that this guy's had from football since the ACL. We're just happy we finally see him on the field. And keep in mind, when he asked about the 2 interceptions, it's just the preseason. Your thoughts on that, Dan?
I understand that. I get that it's the preseason, and I love Dable. But if he forced the football into a tight window and it was a pick 6, that's different. But in that moment, and anyone who's heard me ever talk about Daniel, that's the sticking point for me. In those moments of panic with the ball, what you do with that decision is really the determining factor on, like, are you going to be good, really good, great, or subpar? And the Giants, the one season that Daniel Jones played really good football was 2 years ago. And that's the one thing he got rid of. And that right there has to be concerning to Brian Dable. It has to be concerning because the highs don't cover up for it. Daniel Jones hasn't thrown 3 touchdowns in a game since 2019. He hasn't thrown for 3 touchdown passes in a game since 2019. So if he was lighting the scoreboard up, different conversation. But to have that rear its ugly head, that's got to be an issue. That's got to be concerning.
You know, Hawk, and I know Giants fans are looking at this because they said, hey, we had the 6th pick in the draft. We could have maybe went and got and Nabers looks like he's going to be a stud. Did they make the right decision in getting Malik Nabers and not a quarterback?
I said this in the draft, in the position that they were in. Now, I won't argue grabbing Nabers in the spot that they were in the NFL draft. Well, my opinion was use whatever capital you have to move up and get one of the quarterbacks you feel really good about. Because to Dan's point, like, yes, for Daniel Jones, I hope he gets back to the prime version of what he has been for this football team. But I can't give him the out of after the ACL because to Dan's point, this is the Daniel Jones that was there before the ACL injuries. And when you're thinking about the preseason, no, it's not just preseason. Yes, it's preseason because it can't determine whether you're going to have a great season or what have you. But for a veteran quarterback who is making $40+ million a year and you are bad in ball placement, bad in decision-making, and bad in coverage recognition for a veteran against a defense in a preseason that isn't even the full menu of what you're going to see during the year, that is concerning.